Thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. My name is Kyle with DJI, and we'll give it just a moment here for people to trickle in, be able to watch the webinar. Something that I'm really excited about, been able to partner up with Austin. For anyone that out there that's joining right now, that might be like a drone deploy customer, I was able to actually meet Austin back when I was working at my previous employer at Drone Deploy. So being able to continue to do projects with the Layton team is always good, and watch them evolve their drone program. That would have been 2018 or so, Austin.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe even 2017. That's when we first started using drone deploy. I can't remember when you were there, but would have been sometime around that
2017.
time. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and people can continue to trickle in. And there we are. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about transforming construction operations with the DJI Dock 3. The agenda for today, we're going to be talking a little bit first about Layton Construction. So that'll be mostly Austin talking about how they've been able to start up a drone program, what their drone program looks like now, and how that benefits Layton as a whole. And then we're going to get into the hardware. We've been able to get a Dock 3 on site back in January of this year in 2025, and have been able to kind of put it through the paces on some vertical construction, something that I'm pretty passionate about. It's not always 2D mapping and earthworks that we are trying to fly over when it comes to construction. There's a lot of as-built things that we would like. And then talking about the actual use case, what the hardware looks like on this specific job site, and then we'll have wrap up. Some housekeeping things. First off, feel free to get any questions and answers in the box up there, and we'll do our best to be able to answer those live. And we'll also have some time at the very end to answer any Q&A. We will also, it'd be great to, if you want to ask any questions, we will be following up later. So we'll go ahead and export those out. So make sure you get those questions in. We are also recording this. And so if you do want to watch this at a later time, if you have to drop for any reason, we'll be posting this on our social media and YouTube channels. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get some introductions. I think most of you know me, and I've been on enough DJI webinars, been here for about 3 years now, and my focus is surveying and mapping, and I am on the solutions engineering team. But Austin, mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, first off, thanks to Kyle and to DJI for allowing us to be a part of not only testing Dock 3, but to be a part of this wonderful webinar. So, but my name is Austin Lay. I work with Layton Construction. I just barely hit about 9 years here with the company. And when I started at Layton, I was actually in our marketing department and wasn't truly enjoying what I was doing. And my current boss and boss then, John Ferguson, was looking for somebody to help fly a drone because as he was really tied up with doing what he was doing. And so he asked if I wanted to do it, and I had really never flown one at that point in my life. And so I was like, yeah, that's better than what I'm doing now. And so from that kind of humble beginning grew quite the drone program. So yeah, we had our first drone then, and we have 50 to 60 drones in our fleet now. With that many licensed pilots, always trying to make sure we keep that up to date. But we are located and headquartered here in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is where I am, and we have offices across the entire country, as you can see represented in this map. And so really big footprint that we touch, and drones are being flown in every one of those cities, plus many more that are out there. So, and then this is just a little bit about Layton as a whole. We believe in these core values of honesty, unity, safety, quality, and integrity. And so we try to strive to, as a company to adhere to this, and we take that into our drone program as well, especially with the safety factor of it, is trying not to have any sort of incidents or accidents. And so.
And with that, in talking about your fleet a little bit more, what would be the main piece of equipment in 2025 currently that pilots are using? Is it going to be like a Mavic 3 Enterprise, I would assume?
Yeah, I mean, so we started with the Mavic 2 Pros, and we had a handful of those, and obviously that was a great drone for the time that they were there. And then when the Mavic 3 Enterprise came out, it was game changing. The mechanical shutter and all the other wonderful parts of the longer flight time, the nice RC, so your phone's not getting super hot and you can't see anything what's going on in there. So yeah, so now we probably have about 40 to 45 Mavic 3Es in our fleet right now, and really excited about the Matrice 4E and the 4D that's coming out that we'll talk about here a little bit later. But just one last
Yeah.
part about Layton as a whole. We are part of a bigger organization, which is the STO Building Group, and that happened in 2019. And so that's just been able to help expand our drone program and reality capture footprint in a much larger sense. And so most of these companies have been introduced to drones or had some experience with drones, and so to be able to bring to them the different, well, not the different, but the newer technology that we have has been wonderful.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to kind of see how Layton fits in as a part of the STO building group, specifically when it gets to the drone program. From the conversations I've had, Layton's got one of the largest and leading drone programs when it comes to construction in the United States. So very fun to be able to bring some of the knowledge that you have, Austin, over the many years. What was the first drone that you flew that John had you fly?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. It was the Inspire One, and I don't know why we ever bought such a massive drone to start with, but that's what I cut my teeth on. And if anyone's flown an Inspire One, it was a process to even get that thing, like, the blades on, the gimbal on, the massive battery that flew for only 15 minutes in there, and then it just being such a large drone, it was always intimidating to fly around a construction site. So
Yeah.
um, do definitely appreciate the smallerness of the drones and we have to ship that thing. You have to check that as a bag when you fly with it. Now you can just carry the drones on. So a lot of nice things that can be done with the more smaller and advanced drones.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also important to understand scale. I mean, I think that you understood, even with that Inspire one, you understood what the value was going to be for drones in the construction side over the next coming years as drones got refined. And so instead of getting into drones at a time that drones became refined, and then starting off, crawl, walk, run, where you're at 3 drones, 5 drones, and you work your way up to 12, 20, you're already at the point where you have a large fleet across a lot of different job sites that you're managing. And a lot of those are, if we go back 2 slides, being able to reinforce some of these things that Layton focuses on, like safety, quality, integrity. And with that,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about hardware and how we can utilize the new Dock 3 for to improve some of the safety and quality of the data on the job site. So when we look at a whole, when we get into what DJI has done for remote connectivity, remote drone operations, we started off with Dock 1. That was holding the Matrice 30T. That was April of 2023. So we're looking at just about 2 years ago. That was really an inspection and public safety focused drone, and our first iteration, obviously, of Dock. And we learned a lot when it came to size, footprint, what's needed, what's not, and simplify. And that's what came out of Dock 2. And Austin, you guys have had a number of Dock 2s installed on some job sites. And then we even got the Dock 3 earlier this year. And that refines from are small and tough, understanding hardware wise really what makes the most sense, to now doing some of these intelligent flight plans and processing that we'll talk about in a little bit. But when we talk about Layton and remote operations and Dock, what have you seen the differences and how improvements from M3E to Dock 2 and Dock 2 to Dock 3?
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about how technology works in really in everything, right? Is everything iterates off of the past one. So it's funny because you get this new. I remember getting the Mavic 2 Pro, for example, and I was like, this thing is so cool. It has this nice camera on it. It can do all this stuff. And, you start flying with that for a few months, and then you're like, oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that. And it's almost like that's those are the iterations that will come out of those ones. And so, when you got to the Matrice or the Mavic 3 Enterprise, now we have a mechanical shutter. Now we have a battery life of 40 minutes to 45 minutes. We're getting those things that we want and we needed to be able to do mapping and construction at a faster pace. And so it's to me, every time a new drone comes out, we're getting the things that we needed or wanted with that we didn't quite have in that old one. But we only really figure those things out as we fly constantly and understand kind of how the drone works and what we're looking for. And so, when we, years ago, the rumor was around the whole drone industry, how cool would it be to have something that just pops out of a box and flies around? And it seemed like such a far off thing. And here we are now. We just installed one yesterday. It's our sixth one that we have, and the ability to just quickly launch something, to look at something real quick or take a quick photo of something, uh, is super, invaluable. But the one part that we find most valuable with a dock over maybe a, Mavic 3E is the ability to just have it upload right from the dock. That is such a time saver from someone having to pull the SD card out, put the SD card in the computer, drag and
Yeah.
drop the files. All that stuff is definitely doable, but we're finding such a time savings. And then, as time is money when it comes to construction. And so we're finding this to be such a valuable thing where we're not having to have somebody spend so much time. And then also on top of that, when I was at a job site just yesterday, we were having a conversation. It's like, I have to upload 1,200 photos on a Starlink network right now while we're waiting for our hard internet to come through. And that just bogs my whole machine down to upload. And I can't do anything else the rest of the day. So now I'm taking it home and uploading it there. And so it's nice now that that dock is on this project. It will just upload as it needs to, process as it needs to, and then we'll have that. So I think two things really what I see making the leap is one, that where we don't have to spend so much time uploading the data, and it's just more time exploring and understanding the data. And then the second thing is
So
just, the ease of having the dock fly on its own, or having
yeah,
it do missions like that. So
between both of those, how does that entail or correlate to you guys capturing the site more frequently because it's easier to go out and capture and get the data back?
absolutely. I mean, we're capturing. There are some projects that would capture once a week, for example, like a weekly update, which is great, and maybe that's all that project needs. But some of these other projects that we're on have so much going on in them, and they're such a large scale that within 6 to 8 hours to 12 hours, the site has changed significantly. Even yesterday, when I was on site with this project, the route I took to get to the one job site trailer in the morning was not there in the afternoon due to some trenching that was going on. And so how nice is it to have an updated map at the end of the day that a superintendent can then take and draw a logistics plan on top of and say, well, this was a road this morning that you could use and now you can't use it. You send that out,
Yeah.
you put it on the bulletin board, and everybody has access to what it is. And so, that would have taken someone's time. That would have taken at least an hour to 2 hours of somebody's time to fly at morning and in the end of the day, plus the upload time. So we are definitely seeing jobs fly 2 to 3 times a day at time. Mapping, I'd say twice a day, morning and in the end, and then obviously throwing in videos and photos and things like that.
Yeah. So when we talk specifically about the upgrade, some of the improvements from Dock 2 to Dock 3, um, and we're talking specifically about hardware, a lot of those improvements come down to the environmental factors. And Austin, based off of your earlier slide, it seems like you guys have job sites kind of all across the United States, across a lot of different types of environments. So um, I know we've only been able to test one Dock 3 currently, but what has been some of the main feedback when it comes, and just talk a little bit more about how important it is to have a ruggedized tool that can fly whenever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the coolest part about it, right? Because our first dock was set up in Arizona. So other than some extreme temperatures, that dock's probably going to just be fine. It's going to fly in really nice weather for most of the time. This dock we brought here to Salt Lake. Salt Lake gets all kinds of fun weather, and so I can't remember, Kyle, it was a couple weeks ago. You and I got on the phone. I got down to the site real quick. It was a nice snowstorm, and we launched that thing. And it was so for as hard as it was snowing and for what was going on, to watch that drone navigate through that construction site was honestly something that I've never seen before in a drone, mostly because we don't fly a drone in a big, huge snowstorm. So it was cool to see it. And then to see the data that came from it was even cooler, because it created that nice 3D model. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into this, but just the ability to know that if there's an issue or something that needs to happen where we need to quickly capture something, to know that we're not being hung up by weather. Because you're right, here in Salt Lake or in other northern parts of the U.S., winter can be long at times, and so it's easy for somebody to say, "Well, I can't fly the drone today because the weather's bad." It's like, yeah, it's true, and you shouldn't, but sometimes the teams need that information, and so then you're stuck in this weird spot where it's like, maybe I'll try it, see what happens. But having these now will be such a game changer to where it's like, it is snowing, okay. I mean, as long as it's not like some complete whiteout, you're going to be able to capture and see good data from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also when you talk about like some of the sites in the West or in the Midwest or like where I'm based in Iowa, where we get quite a bit of wind, having a nice improvement from Dock 2 to Dock 3. Dock 2, the highest setting that you could turn it off if you absolutely needed to, but if you had the safety setting on for the wind speed, it was 18 mile an hour is the fastest takeoff and landing. And now we've improved up to 27 miles an hour. So that should be able to capture longer in the day as it gets windier. I know that even today, like we speak about it, we're in a potential tornado advisory. So we'll see how that rocks and rolls. But either way, being able to just nearly ensure that if it's safe to fly, it's going to operate and it's going to operate well. And you're taking kind of the human error element out of it when flying in these type of environments. We trust our hardware, but sometimes pilots can make decisions that might hinder the overall flight. So let's talk a little bit more about the actual hardware and the hardware improvements. This is going to be the Matrice 4 Dock series hardware. Very similar payloads, if not pretty much the same payload as the new Matrice 4 Enterprise. Since we're focused on construction here, we are really more focused on the mapping and surveying sensor. But if you look at just the overall characteristics of the hardware, being able to fly, like Austin said, while it's snowing, having that IP55 rating of the actual drone as well, and still being able to get good data from it. When we look at the actual hardware, the sensor part of it, some of the improvements over the Dock 2, which would be the Matrice 3D platform, is our shooting speed and the ability of moving the gimbal left and right when we're talking about oblique capture. So we were able to, on the site that we talked about, or that we're going to talk about, how many acres is that site roughly? It's not very big.
No, it's not a huge one, but it's got a lot of buildings around it, which is, I think, the reason we picked it. I don't know. I'd
Yeah.
say I don't know, 6, 7 acres possibly for the whole site, but it's not big.
Yeah.
And I will say, the obstacle avoidance real quick on this drone is impressive. When we flew it in that storm, we had another project engineer on the other side of the building, and Kyle obviously remotely viewing it. And you'll see here in a little bit some of the nuances of this project, but I was literally on the one side of the building watching it navigate around 2 cranes, around a whole entire active drop site without missing a beat and just really hitting all those marks. And there was definitely times where we were watching it really close, obviously watching it very closely, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that go on a job site, and so to see it do all those different things and to move around it was definitely was something that I don't think Dock 2 would do super great at. So
Yeah, and even if we talk about iterations there, the improvements that the drone that Dock 2 was over Dock 1 or over like the Mavic 2 Pro, Phantom 4 Pro days, that was a huge leap into being able to do some inspections and being able to do those safely. And now being able to automate a mission with Dock 3 and with the Matrice 4D or even the 4E, it's a lot safer operations. One question I do have, now that we have these mid tele cameras and the zoom cameras, and maybe you don't necessarily use them, but do you find yourself ever manually flying and zooming in, or is most of your capture still going to be automated?
Yeah, I'd say it's 90% is always going to be automated, but no, there's definitely
Yeah.
times, especially in some substation stuff or other places. And I think even though we don't necessarily use it, it's a cool feature to show that we have, right? So if there is an opportunity to use it or have it, it's a tool in our tool belt that we have. But anytime you can zoom in on something and take the human element out of it, and what I mean by that is instead of having to send somebody into some place to like inspect or something, if you can do that from the air and being a little further away, then that's always going to be a preferred thing. But yeah, most definitely with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, even the zoom on that it gets utilized quite a bit. So what's really cool about some of the stuff we tested with the new dock is how great the 3D model comes out and the pictures that comes from that. And so that's a new way that we're starting to see people inspect their buildings is through some of this 3D model capture.
Well, you know what they say about data, right, Austin? Data, garbage in, garbage out. So it does require getting high quality data for a high
Yep.
quality 3D model. And that's where mechanical shutter, 0.5 second trigger, 4/3 inch sensor, uh, DJI, I would say, is kind of leading the game for this size of drone for high quality imagery. Extended flight time. I know this doesn't necessarily, we didn't do a whole lot of testing on extended flight time for this drone or for this dock, but uh, how many of your sites, or do you have a number of sites that are significantly large that have an extended flight time? Being able to fly faster, being able to capture faster is going to be an improvement.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? You look at this diagram or this picture, and it's like, what's a 3-minute upgrade? And it's like, in the world of drones, 3 minutes is a long time, especially when you're talking over a couple hundred acres of site. And that's a difference of finishing the leg of the mission or being able to capture those last few things and try to hopefully get it all done in a map. So I would say the majority, not even the majority, all of our docks are on large site projects for that reason. So anytime you can improve the flight time and stuff like that is going to be massive because then we're able to um, capture more of the site as we fly. And I know you've seen some of those projects as we've worked through some of the stuff, and I'm sure you would agree that the longer you can fly, the better that's going to be to capture. And I say that in a way that you're trying to do everything in one shot, right? And so instead of having the dock come back and recharge, now I will say this: that is the cool part about Dock 3, the recharge. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the recharge on this thing is insane. And so that really, in a way, to me, does not become as big of an issue now versus what Dock 2 is. And Dock 2 still recharges at a good rate, but it is a little more on the slow side when you compare it to maybe what you want to see. But yeah, this new charge rate is really nice in what the Dock 3 has.
And a couple of the things on that, and we haven't tested this yet, and I don't mean to get your mouth watering too much, Austin, but FlightHub 2 does support multi-dock support for mission capture. And so with the price point of these docks and of these drones and for the sizes of some of these sites, having multiple docks and being able to just have the drone be able to land in the nearest dock, offload data, charge, and then continuously fly when you're looking at those 600 acre sites, 1,000 acre sites that we're starting to see pop up more and more.
Oh yeah, I mean that's super cool, and especially for anyone who's doing infrastructure too, right? If you're mapping long roadways, that's got to be
Yeah.
really intriguing as well, right? To be able to say, I have three docks and one drone, and that thing can handle that. But yeah, we're definitely looking at testing some of that stuff where we can, dock hop, I guess is what people like to call it. So,
Yeah. Cool.
but this
Well,
drone
we
right
also
here, yeah, this.
We also have something that's a little bit different with Dock 3 versus Dock 2, and we are selling the drone standalone, and it's meant to be in a standalone combo. So, Austin, the majority of your drones are going to be something that you have a pilot still manually flying. So something like this may be intriguing to you. It's going to be very similar to buying a Matrice for Enterprise. The only difference is it is a little bit more expensive, but that's because we have an IP rating for this drone compared to the Matrice 4 Enterprise. So an IP55 if you need to be flying in inclement weather. It is a little bit larger because the arms don't fold up, but that also gives you a couple minutes more flight time and a little bit more wind rigidity over the Matrice 4 Enterprise. So that being said, do you find yourself needing to fly in inclement weather where the IP rating is like super important to you that you'd be purchasing that more Matrice 4 Enterprise? And how do you see that from the Mavic 3 Enterprise that is kind of dominated currently?
Yeah, no, this is when I saw this, I was really intrigued because even with the Mavic, or sorry, with the Dock 2, you could essentially pull that drone out and fly it with the RC Pro if you wanted to. Not that you need to, but the fact that you could just go out and buy this alone, and I think a lot of people will initially probably see this and say something like, "What? This doesn't make any sense." But the part that I want to drive home, and I think you did, is that this is IP rated, and so this really becomes game changing in those territories that we're building with a lot of rain. Think of the Pacific Northwest, and if you're building in that area and there in constant, days of rain, to be able to fly this on like a lighter rain day or something like that would be super beneficial. We have, think if you're building in like the upstate New York area or Pacific Northeast, right, where
Yeah.
you get some really bad snow, or even the Midwest. I mean, where you're at, you get some really bad weather from time to time, and so yeah, just be able to have this in our arsenal, I think, is going to be something that's super important. And I think we'll still lean towards the Matrice 4 just for the ability to quickly move those around. But I mean, to have these to deploy out will definitely be adding to our fleet. But and the nice, get this cool little backpack right there to carry it around in, so that's real nice too. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for the price point, we're going to be seeing a lot of mixed fleets between the M4E and the M4D, and it just really is going to depend on what your use case is. If you're going more public safety, search and rescue, DFR, or inspection, depending on what the inspections are, you're definitely going to be leaning a little bit harder here. If you're going more surveying and mapping, you may be having a fleet that's a little bit heavier Matrice for Enterprise, but having something like you said, having some of these available so that they can be shipped out and used or mainly focused in those harsher environments. Cool. Let's go ahead and we don't need to take a look at what the case looks like too much. Fun marketing videos. But one last slide that we have would be the accessories. We haven't been able to test all of these accessories with Layton, but we do want to bring up that it kind of takes that whole ecosystem to make sure that you can tackle pretty much any use case that gets thrown at you. So if we look on the very left-hand side, the vehicle mounted gimbal mount, Austin, I think you texted me and asked, even though we were, focused on the use case of flying a certain job site continuously multiple times per week, you even asked about, could I mount this in my pickup and what does that look like? So within construction, how do you foresee a vehicle mounted dock benefiting?
yeah, so think how cool this would be, right? You have it in the back of your truck, you pull up, you fly it real quick, it lands, and then you're off to the next one. I could definitely see, here in Salt Lake, we have a handful of projects, and not every one of them has a drone due to a handful of things. But think about if you just, and this wouldn't be applicable to, a job that's in the middle of nowhere, but like, you think about the ability to fly 5 or 6 projects within a few hours of time while you're deploying this out of the back of your truck. And yeah, we have
Yeah.
a Chevy EV here that we want to test that on and see how that looks. And so that's when I reached out and said, one, how cool would that be? You got this dock in the back of this truck that just like pops out and flies and captures data. And so, we're always looking to innovate and try these new things. And so when I saw these mounts, I was like, we got to give this a run and give it a try. So, and then I know
Yeah.
you'll talk a little bit more about some of this other stuff, but I think that the other part I want to highlight here is the RC+2 controller. That thing is
Yeah.
so nice to have, and it's large, and the screen's big, and you can see everything that's going on, and to me it's a huge upgrade. That's another huge upgrade that I don't think we highlight enough. But having that really big screen and that remote is just super big. And then obviously these other things I haven't really looked a ton into, but I'll let you talk probably a little more about the optical sensing module. You've explained that to me a few times, and I'm really excited about what that has to do, and hopefully we can test that as well.
Yeah, when we look at that optical sensing module, essentially it's a lidar sensor, mid 360 sensor that's on top of it. Currently, it's supported with the Matrice 4 Dock series. What that's going to do is be able to detect very thin structures, and then depending on what your obstacle avoidance settings are, being able to move around that object and continue your flight path. And it really takes, when you think about obstacle avoidance, it really, in my opinion, takes a full suite, because it's not really a one size fits all. We might see that a little bit with Tesla and Elon trying to go full on photogrammetry. But I do think that utilizing things like radar, while radar, you can detect things far away, it's not very specific. If you need more specificity, or if you're trying to get thinner things, that's where LiDAR is going to be able to benefit. And then visual, you get into that. Visual is super affordable, but it does take a significant amount of processing power, as well as low light environments. It just doesn't work unless you try to enlight the environment yourself. So being able to have a full stack solution there, and the stat that I've heard about this is being able to detect 12 millimeter wires at 15 meters per second, or 33 miles an hour, which we're kind of getting pretty close to that holy grail of obstacle avoidance. Between that, the mission planning that we're talking about here in a little bit, and the sensor technology, and the drone technology, and the gimbal technology, all of it, all in one, it's pretty cool to see. But I do want to bring
No,
up
it's
the
super
one last
cool.
thing, the DRTK3 relay. Are you guys utilizing any base stations currently, or utilizing ground control points, checkpoints, RTK?
Yep. All of the we don't have obviously not the RTK3 relay, but yeah, we have
Right.
everything, the ground control and the different things like that, as well as utilizing, yeah, I mean, any of these sites that have these docks for sure have RTK on them, have ground control points on them, to obviously get the most out of what we're trying to achieve. So
Yeah, and there's some nice improvements there. I mean, huge improvements over the DRTK2 when you're using it as a standalone solution to be able to go tag. But on top of that, the having it being able to be used as a relay system, where instead of having, we had folks mounting the dock on top of a building because they wanted to make sure that it would have connectivity to the drone. Now we can have the dock on the ground, and as long as it has some moderate sky, we can have the DRTK3 and the new, uh, it's a new mount that we released with the Dock 3. We can have all that just sitting at the very top, and we don't have to get a crane to lift it to the top of the building or try to get it up the elevator, and we just have that sitting up there. So once again, an ecosystem of it not just being an accurate base station finally, but also a repeater system is going to be super beneficial. Do you foresee any dock installations where you're putting them on top of buildings?
yeah, interesting you bring that up. We actually try to put all of our docks on top of our trailers, and
Okay.
buildings, just for the simplicity of one, it's out of the way. So, no one, unfortunately, I would like to think that construction sites don't have any problems or issues, but someone may just run something over on accident and not see it. And so,
Yeah.
and you can fence these things off and you can build them on pads, but we got a pretty robust system now where we do some, some unistrut and some stuff and put it on top of these trailers we have, and um, it just works out well. I guess the one downside to that would be that if you have to get to it, then you got to get up on the roof. And so if it's
Yeah.
inclement weather, then that's not as fun to do. But I mean, other than that, but with some of these relay, with this being a relay, that's going to help drastically, because the reason we put them on roofs is because they're on large sites and we want to make sure they have as clear a line of sight as they can. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, we're definitely looking forward to trying out some of the relays and how we can make that a better system.
Cool. Well, I think we've talked about hardware enough. Let's go ahead and talk about how you guys have started utilizing Dock 3 on the job site. If we look at just kind of an introductory slide of how drones and how docks can be used on construction, I mean, the main thing is from a project manager, project director, VDC perspective, getting eyes on the job site and monitoring any change is going to be of the utmost importance, wouldn't you say?
100%. Especially, you look at those top 3 points there: site monitoring, earthwork, and asset inspection. Earthwork to me is probably for us one of the biggest things that we're tracking,
Yeah.
and so the sooner the better, right? And if we can get to a project literally day one that they're breaking ground, it just gives us that advantage. Well, not so much an advantage, but it just gives us the confidence that we're being able to track this from day one. And so having all that information is super vital.
Yeah, I shouldn't say always, I've said fairly recently that uh, when it comes to the lowest hanging fruit, and maybe it's just the way that my brain works, but the lowest hanging fruit on how to utilize drones for any sort of commercial purpose, one, search and rescue and utilizing it for public safety is an obvious no-brainer how it can benefit. And two, specifically construction and earthworks, being able to make a map that's accurate and then make a second map and being able to measure a stockpile or track the change over time for how affordable this is and how accurate this is. If that's what you're trying to do and you're not utilizing drones at this point, uh, it's kind of behind the eight ball, so to say. So if we take a look at the actual site overview, once again, we got a drone up on top of a trailer like we were talking about before. But do you mind talking a little bit more about what this job site looks like, kind of the environment, very
Yeah.
urban?
So yeah, this is a project here in Salt Lake City. It's in our downtown area, and it's some parking structure and then some multifamily that sits above it. And this project is, if you can see kind of from that map on the bottom picture, there's a lot of buildings around it, and it's obviously going vertical. And so when Kyle approached us with this opportunity, we showed him a handful of different projects that we had, and he kind of liked the look of this one, and so did I, because it gives us a unique challenge to fly this drone in some very tight areas and to really push it through its paces. And that's one thing that we want to do always when we're testing any sort of hardware is understand its limits and limitations, and which could be good and can be bad. Sometimes we find ourselves wrecking something or having an accident with something, but I think that's part of the process of training and practicing, is understanding exactly the limitations of it while doing it obviously in a safe environment. So
Yeah.
but yeah, this project was wonderful. They allowed us to come down. I think Kyle you've been here twice now, I think, to this project. And so, very
Yeah.
accommodating to what we're trying to do. And they're very excited and have been excited about the stuff that we're sharing with them. So,
Yeah, it's a little bit more unconventional when you talk about drones. We just talked about it on the last slide about earthworks and how simple that can be. And I feel like we've really already hammered down that use case enough of being able to fly over for earthworks. So let's find something that we can make some pretty crazy flight plans with. Not crazy, but some pretty detailed flight plans, I will say. So how did we use Dock 3 currently on this site, and what does that workflow look like? First, when we got on site, when Austin and I were there in January, very first thing we did was we flew over that. Yeah, you can see it's only about 4 acres total, so not very much, but it's a very quick flight. We flew with Smart 3D capture, and that um, you can see within FlightHub 2, as that gimbal moves around, no longer with Dock 2, you had to do a checkerboard if you wanted to do the 5-axis oblique and capture all 5 sides, but now we can capture all 5 sides with the Matrice 4D. And you also notice how the drone is going up and down. That's that live terrain follow feature. So it can recognize based off the visual sensors on the bottom of the drone how far away it is off the ground and adjust accordingly, not just for safety, but also to be able to make sure you have that very uh, you have a very even side lap and overlap percentage. So
Yeah,
a quick
that
site survey
gimbal's.
later.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Austin.
I was gonna say that gimbal's crazy. That 5 axis to watch it work is pretty unique. And like you're saying, when you don't have to do those big crosshatch missions anymore, it's nice to be able to get it all done kind of in that same. Again, it's just those iterations, like I was talking about earlier, from drone to drone, what you would hope and want to see. We're starting to see that, which is really time saving. So
Yeah. And another one of the iterations that you didn't even mention. So being able to have the gimbal axis was one that you did mention, not having to do the crosshatch. The next one being a zero point 0.5 versus a 0.7 second
yes,
trigger speed. Like it sounds very small, zero point 0.2 seconds. But a lot of these sites, especially when you get into geometric and slope missions, where these data sets are becoming 3, 4, 5,000 photos, not uncommon. And so capturing all of those, when you take 0.2 seconds multiplied how many photos, you do start seeing those time savings.
big difference. Yep.
Yeah. So then we started planning the missions. We started planning geometric missions. You can kind of see in the upper right corner. I think I have a video here. Um, and Austin, have you been able to play around much with platforms that have been able to do flight planning over 3D models like this? Have you been
Yeah,
able to see
just
that
well
from
in
prior?
yeah in here, and it's really unique. I know this is a video, but there's that little red bar you can drag up, and that will just become a higher spiral and things like that. And yeah, oh, you're doing it right there. I was doing it right there. But anyways, no, it's really cool and really unique. And one thing that we at Layton, we use a lot of drone deploy as well. And so to be able to have these two work together and to be able to pull the data from here to upload it to there is really nice. And the reason why it's nice to do that is because you as DJI create the drone, build the drone, and then it's ready to go. And anytime a third party software company is using it, there's some testing on there and they have to do. So what's really nice about this is that we can jump in right now in FlightHub and start using it right away, and then uploading it to Drone Deploy, and then as soon as they come around with their stuff to make it work in their system, we'll start obviously flying in that as well. But to be able to
Yeah.
test this early on and understand exactly how the drone works, so by the time I'm ready to deploy this company wide and to roll it out to projects, it's going to be a lot more simple for me because when the Mavic 3E came out, we were trying so hard to fit that into the box of drone deploy. So there was a lot of pain points in just how that all worked out, and that's not to anybody's fault. That's just how technology goes, and when you're trying to do something new. But to have all this experience and time tested now in FlightHub with how the drone can work and how it can avoid things and stuff like that will just make it so much easier for us to deploy it nationwide once those drones become readily available. So.
Yeah, and what and it kind of goes back to why are we doing this in the first place? Garbage in, garbage out. If we can't necessarily we're always looking to be getting better and better data. And so if we're able to create a geometric mission and be able to stay within 10 to 20 feet away from that vertical job site, and be able to take all of that data, load it into Drone Deploy, and have a Drone Deploy user interface where you can go through the inspection workflow. You can start using some of the overlays and the walkthroughs that they have. It just ends up being some pretty intense and spectacular data. And as we continue to move forward, we have this ability with the Matrice for enterprise currently, and it's something that we are working towards as we get into Dock 3. But we do have very smart mission planning where you could go and fly over a site where we saw earlier with that 5-axis oblique, and it's going to maybe take 8 minutes, process that data very quickly. And then from there, you can build a smart 3D capture mission where it's going to be following all of those green lines and capture data. And now, why is it important, Austin, that you would want to do an updated 5-axis oblique before every single capture if this is the way you're using it?
Well, construction changes every day. You know, got to understand where things sit
Exactly.
in the real world. So this is really valuable too, because, you know, even for the operator who may be on site, you know, even though he's walking the project, things still change from the view of the drone, right? So, you know, we
Yeah.
run the missions you had on the last couple slides, but
So when it comes to the actual data capture side, one thing that I think both Austin and I were pretty blown away with, because this is the very first time I was seeing a Dock 3 take off as well, was the takeoff speed and the speed of it connecting to RTK. How have you seen the difference on the speed of takeoff and going and capturing data compared to Dock 2?
yeah, I mean, this thing was like, yeah, both of us, I think, looked at each other, didn't even realize. I mean, it's like a shot out of a cannon, man. That thing just like shot straight in the air, and that, even though that video shows it, it doesn't even do it justice. Especially if you have any experience with the dock too, and it just is like a long, like a 5 minute process. It feels like to start it up, get going. Then the wings spin kind of once, and they spin again, and they go. And it just is kind of a like this gradual takeoff. But this thing, man, it's just like it starts, it spins, and then just boom, it's gone. And so, you know, that's nice too, because it's just, I don't know how much, and I'm sure there's data to back this up, but I don't know it off the top of my head, but you know, there's probably some battery loss that's being used in the dock too to fire it up and to run through its thing and connect. With this, it was so quick, it just got in the air, and obviously the faster it's in the air, the faster it can start capturing. So really a cool part about it, and something that, you know, when we first got Dock 2, I thought, oh, this takes forever to take off compared to the Mavic 3E, where you just can fire it off at pretty, you know, you start the propellers and you can send it on its way. So, but it was also something that I never really thought could be improved on, or at least like in my mind was like this, you know, this wouldn't be on my top of my list to be improved. But now that it is, it's like, wow, this is really neat to see it just kind of go like that. So,
Yeah, it's those efficiencies and improvements all around the board. So the mission, the geometric mission that we are going out and capturing for data, the first one, what we were planning on, since we have cranes moving around, I shouldn't say we, since you guys have cranes moving around on the site, is we were thinking being able to spiral around the building that is going up and continue to go up as the building gets added onto. And then instead of adding a top base on it, where we may have issues with cranes, we just ended up doing a smart or an oblique capture, 5-axis oblique over the entire site, and then merging those together. But when we look at the geometric capture, now we've talked pretty much the entirety of our drone lives, both Austin and I, about inches per pixel. What's the resolution in inches per pixel? Or we might talk centimeters per pixel. I've been doing that a whole lot more since I've at DJI. But now we're talking millimeters per pixel, or even
uh,
fractions of millimeters. So this is flown 24 feet from the surface, 2 millimeter per pixel GSD. And I think I even adjusted it since this slide deck. I think we might even be at like 16 feet, which is even like 1.4 millimeters per pixel,
it's
capturing
crazy.
almost 2,000 photos, but only in 17 minutes. One battery, like
Yep.
45% when it's back. So crazy.
Well, and we don't have it on this slide deck, I don't think, but you remember we had a follow up call, you and I was showing you a screenshot that I took from the model. And what was funny about it, and I've told this story to a handful of people, is that Kyle thought it was the FPV of the drone. He thought we were looking at like a live
Yeah.
feed, kind of like you're seeing in this slide right here. And because even the detail of the model inside the building was impressive, you could see this stuff recreated in the model. Long story short, I mean, that I told him, I said, this isn't the FPV, man. This is the actual model
Yeah.
that DJI created. And he was, I mean, he seemed visibly shook by it to some extent, right? I think he even was caught off. And I think that's the cool part about some of the stuff that this modeling can do. And then I took that to some other people internally, and they, same thing. They thought I was showing them some live feed of the drone, and I'm like, no, this is just a model. And even picked up, I think if you remember, Kyle, like the snow, like it was crazy that it was all in there. So that's why I think you thought it may have been like that. So
Yeah, I don't understand how, and that's kind of the magic of FlightHub 2 processing slash Terra processing, is the textures and the meshes that come out of these data sets when you get this good quality and incredibly high quality data. It's just, yeah. And it wasn't even a splat. It was a or a Nerf. It was a straight up photogrammetric 3D
Yep.
model, and it looked so real. But
Yeah.
that's the simplicity of capture, and just went through and being able to. And I think that we've got two different cranes on this site. Here's another one coming up that it showed up behind us. You can see the obstacle avoidance sensor there on the bottom where you have something pop up. We also, this is the virtual cockpit view. So this is where I envision Austin sitting at his main office that has probably like 14, 16 monitors everywhere with all the
Different
different
drones.
views
Yeah.
going on. But one of them being this virtual cockpit mode where you're getting the live video feed, you're getting the map in 3D as well as the 3D model overlay. You have all the functionality to take over and the improvements on Dock 3 over Dock 2 where we have the AI turned on, where it's kind of nice being able to see as the job site's going, it's going to alert and let us know where construction workers are so we can maintain that level of safety.
Well, this doesn't show it either, but on the left, if there was an airplane flying by, you would see that airplane depicted as an airplane or a helicopter, so you would understand that as well, which is a really cool feature that really kind of came out with the Mavic 3E when it would tell you there's an aircraft nearby. We also see that in Dock 2 when you're looking at this, you can see those things. So just some more safety stuff as we take safety very seriously. So we want to make sure that obviously we're flying within the regulations, but also making sure that we're not, putting anyone in harm's way. And there's that other crane right there. So
Yeah, I got some guide wires there that will pop up on the obstacle avoidance, I believe. But uh, anyway, that this site, it may not be as important just because we're flying so close to the building. That being said, Salt Lake City International Airport wasn't super far away from this, and so just being alert to what aircraft are. But a lot of your sites that are doing, large scale earthworks, you are flying 2, 3, 400 feet off the ground. And that's where the safety in the airspace thing is really big when it comes to the FlightHub 2 integration.
correct. Yep.
So then we go ahead once we've captured both the 5-axis oblique and the geometric mission, we can export both of those data sets out of FlightHub 2. Austin, you mentioned about processing that data in Drone Deploy and been seeing some pretty big data sets uploaded to Drone Deploy.
Oh yeah, man, these have been huge data sets, and it's great. It's good to have them in both. And I think for me as someone who kind of leads the charge here, I being well versed in both sides is obviously really great. And so, but yeah, it's really unique and nice to be able to just to get the data in the hands of the people who need it, whether it's through DJI, whether it's through Drone Deploy. It's all the same at the end of the day, as long as the data is telling the story. And so, yeah, this is a great view of this model. You can see like the two by
Yeah,
fours in there, and like, yeah.
you could basically just get a floor plan straight from this 3D model super, super easily. Um, Yeah, and so this is all FlightHub 2 processing. I think the video just maybe stop. We can go back a little bit, but that is the quality of Terra. I have there are not very many photogrammetric engines out there that have textures and meshes quite as good as Terra. And so if you're looking for a resource for just getting a processing engine, it's hard not to turn to Terra or FlightHub 2 Cloud if you're looking to process data in the cloud. We also do have a couple other tools built into FlightHub 2 that we'd like to let people know about, because it's not just about having this drone data siloed. There's a lot of other data that your team, Austin, has of these job sites, whether it's earthworks data, cut fill, DXFs. You've got floor plans for each individual floor, even walkthroughs that you're trying to maybe merge data with. So the important thing for us is how can we be a tool to start analyzing, understanding how the job site has changed. One of those is our analyzer tool, where we can detect changes from one date over another. I know you haven't played around with this a whole lot, Austin, but what would be your initial reaction to having a alert system for whatever has changed from one date to the next date?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really where a lot of the construction industry is heading. They want to see, there's different applications out in this world, progress tracking type stuff. And so I think anytime you can track progress and change over time is going to be super beneficial. And so, currently right now, some of that stuff is done with a 360 camera and you're walking the site and then you're uploading it and that's getting processed. That can take some time, to walk and to upload. So to be able to do it in 8 minutes and fly it and then have the data to upload and then look at, yeah, these things will become so valuable on a project, especially just to show change over time, sorry, and then be able to just, especially I can see this, when you have some heavy earthwork, and I mean when you're doing some sort of utility package or something, this will be really huge to fly over those utility stuff and then look the next day or the next day and see how that changes. So
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're pretty close to the end here. Yep. So that was talking a little bit more about how we've been able to utilize Dock 3 on that specific project. I think I chose a fairly good one, simply because I've kind of done or been done with the earthwork stuff. The level of importance is the highest, but I feel like we've really drilled that use case home. So being able to really lean into the abilities of Dock 3, the abilities of the Matrice 4D, and capturing this vertical site down with millimeter resolution, something I've been pretty excited about. And Austin, we really appreciate both you and John and Layton team as a whole for being able to beta test a lot of this hardware for us and some of this software.
no, we thank you guys as well. Thank you for the time and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this webinar.
Perfect. Well, at this time, we're going to go ahead and kick it over to Q&A. Hopefully you can get some more questions up in the box, and we'll spend the next probably 10 or 15 minutes being able to answer questions. So as we go through, if you do need to drop off, that's fine. And thank you very much.